Okay, Your Honor, you can take over. It's ready to go.
Go.
Yes, it's ready to go.
All right. Good morning, buddy. Welcome to our session.
Your Honor, you're cutting in and out. You must have a bad connection.
Okay. Well, I'll turn it over to Scott. Scott, go ahead.
Good morning, Mayor, council members. Thanks for joining us this Monday morning. We have 3 topics to cover at this work session, and actually all 3 are going to have Sue Ann Donovan speaking. So I'm going to turn it right over to her to talk about encroachments as they relate to homeless encampments. So Sue Ann, go right ahead.
Good morning, Mayor and Council. We're going to start today to talk about encroachments on city property. So when we talk about encroachments, this is kind of what a camp would look like when we go and do a cleanup. You can see lots of junk, debris, garbage, that type of issues that we deal with when we go out and do a cleanup. So a little history on the process. In 2012, we amended Chapter 102 to include encroachment notices and hearings. At that time, we met with service providers to discuss how we could work together on the issue of the encampments. They wanted to go into the camps and try to get people benefits to move to safe and secure housing. And we're all in favor of that. We agreed to work with them and not clean sites where someone was staying waiting for benefits. So we developed operating procedures for complaints regarding encroachments on city property. With IT's help, we created a mapping through GIS to resolve property ownership issues. So when we're out there, we ping the site. And then when we come back into the office, we can identify whose property the encroachment is on. And then we again coordinate with service providers. We tell them where we're going to go out and post a 10-day notice. You know, it used to be a 21-day notice. We backed that off to a 10-day notice. The notice is to allow them to appeal the cleanup of the encroachment through the administrative hearing process. But if the site is determined to be hazardous, we're going to clean up the hazardous conditions immediately. Hazardous conditions would include raw garbage, human waste, needles, some other things that need to be cleaned up immediately. So at the expiration of 10 days, if there's no appeal, we'll go out and do another inspection. And then if the encroachment is remaining, we'll post a 4-day notice, and the removal will occur as soon as the expiration of the 5th day. Again, we notify service providers of the pending cleanup so that they can provide assistance to people prior to or during the cleanup process. Again, the appeal goes to our administrative hearing judge, and that stays the cleanup effort until after the hearing can be held, and the ALJ can issue a determination on whether they feel the cleanup should proceed. On private property, we will send the owner a notice of the encroachment. If the owner requests assistance, the city may assist in the cleanup. Enforcement proceedings will begin if the owner fails to abate the violation. A lot of the cleanups occur on railroad property, and so we work with the railroad companies to conduct cleanups. At some times, they will come and bring in their own equipment to help us do the cleanup on their property. So a lot of times we're doing cleanups on railroad and city property simultaneously with their assistance. Again, a picture of an encroachment that we've posted that will require a cleanup. So just to kind of get an idea of how much effort we put into this process, Public Works spent $54,104.87 on cleanups in 2020. We had a supervisor spend 8 hours a week, so at about 416 hours in 2020. An inspector assisting estimated at 4 hours a week, which is about 208 hours, so a total of 614 hours in 2020. I'm asking finance to get the salary information so we can know how much actual money is being spent in salaried hours for cleanups. This is under the Grand Avenue Bridge. We have bridges that people stay under that have become damaged due to fires, and we're assessing now how to stabilize the bridges and maybe in some cases put up barriers so that people can't continue to live under the bridges and start fires, which is a hazard for the bridges. Here's a sort of an idea of the amount of money that we're putting into the homeless and rapid rehousing and outreach for 2021. You'll see that's quite a substantial amount of money that we're trying to use to rehouse people and get them in safe and secure shelters. We did meet with the service providers last week. It was a productive meeting, trying again to establish the connection of working together on long-term solutions. Some of their questions were, where do they tell campers to move when the site is posted? There's really not a good answer for that. And then there's always the long-term solution for chronic homelessness, still to be worked out, and an ongoing process of trying to assist people that are chronically homeless. So that's the basics of our encroachment cleanup and our efforts on this subject. So I would like to move to questions and comments from council at this point.
Anybody have any questions? Josh and Connie.
So when you had conversations with the service providers last week, today, my understanding is there was space at Central Iowa Shelter and Service. What do they identify as barriers? Are there folks just, are the folks who are chronically homeless, folks who are not willing to come into the shelters, not able to be served by the shelter? What is the issue that we think we're facing today?
That's a good question, and I think it's multifaceted. I think there are people who cannot go back into the shelter for one reason or another. There are also people that don't want to access that housing choice. And I think it takes a long time to try to get people to trust enough to move into a sheltered environment. So that's a long-term, harder solution. But when you talk to the service providers, I think that it is a combination of they don't trust the system, they don't want to be in shelters, and they can't abide by some of the guidelines and rules that the shelters have, and so they choose to stay in camps.
Connie?
That actually is one of my questions. The other thing is, I know that many times when they're out camping, the problem is their possessions. Do the providers, or is there some type of like a storage pod or something that if we are going to get them housing somewhere else, they could put their things? Because that seems to be one of their big obstacles of leaving the camp, is all the things that they have, whether it be their bike or what we might not consider great, in great condition, some things, that's their possessions and tents and things like that. So the providers have any idea of what they could possibly do for their personal possessions?
I think from what I got from our conversation is what they do before the cleanup is try to make sure that things that are important, papers, medication, that type of thing is moving with them, and they help provide some service to help them gather their things and move it. I have not heard, and it's a good question, actually, I've not heard of a place where people could store and keep their belongings safe, but that is worth a larger discussion with the service providers.
And if the goal, when you start costing out everything, is a goal to possibly get like some type of housing voucher or something that they can go to, because some of them, you're right, they just don't want to go into a shelter environment.
Right. I think what the service providers try to do is see if the individual has any benefits that they can access to get permanent housing, for perhaps VA benefits, Social Security benefits, some kind of, get vouchers lined up for them, get the first month's rent and deposit lined up, and find the housing and get them in somewhere where they're safe and stable, and not necessarily having to abide by all of the rules of a shelter. That is the ultimate goal that we all have, is to get people into permanent safe shelter.
And I'm sure there's a shortage of that, so.
Carl?
Oh, thank you, Mayor County. So along the Des Moines River and the Raccoon River corridors, is the land, I guess that's called a greenway, technically, is that city property, or, for example, there's some posting of signs along the Des Moines River, and so it's posted no camping, and it's city code quoted. So is that city land there, or whose land is that?
Well, it's a combination of city and federally controlled
Okay.
land next to for the river and for the flood control. We are, as a party to agreements with the federal government, that we will protect the levees and keep people off of them. So
Okay.
it may not be our ownership, but it is our obligation.
Okay, I've got three more, I hope, quick questions. So this last week, there were some camps that were cleaned out, and they had been posted. Generally speaking, do the campers move out before the city staff comes in, or, if the camps were cleaned out, but did people move voluntarily or not?
I think we find that for the most part, when we post the we're coming to clean it up notice, they're moving voluntarily and taking what they want to with them.
Okay.
Occasionally you'll find somebody who hasn't moved, and what the crews do is clean up other areas while they can gather their belongings and vacate. And we hope, with the aid of our partners, service providers, with their help. So it's a combination, but I think most of the time they have gathered what they want and have moved on.
Okay, so additional question here is, I know this is a time of year where the woods have not leafed out yet, and it's puzzling to people who contact me, like, why is there so much trash in the camps? And you know, I don't think that at least people I talk to would be so would object so much if they weren't so trashy. Is there any, have other cities figured out how to deal with this, or any insight as to what we could make changes we could make in our policies that there wouldn't be as much trash? Suggestions on that?
Well, I know that JAPA goes out periodically and helps clean up accumulations of trash. I think Public Works has gone out and left toters to be picked up later to help people clean up the trash. I would be interested in looking at more options for that, and just see if there isn't some way to assist in that.
Okay.
In some ways, I think it's, I don't know if it's a lifestyle or if it's a choice that they don't clean up, but it just seems that the accumulation of trash is the problem, or one of the problems. So if we can find a solution, that would be, or at least assist, that would be
Right.
Yeah.
And my final question is regarding camps that are just right up against our trails or bridges, and the occupants harassing people. And for example, there's a new camp right now on the north bank of the Raccoon at the 5th Street Bridge. I've run across that bridge for, I don't know, 20 years, never seen a camp right there. But especially for women that are running solo, they're used to the great downtown lighting along trails, but it's very uncomfortable when they're being harassed in that area. And it's I know it's a challenge for everyone who's on this call, but I don't think we would be experiencing the complaints if it just wasn't right there, right as you get off or get on the 5th Street Bridge. So I believe this is one of the locations that is being, I don't know if is challenged or
I think they filed an appeal, which is making
appeal.
it,
There we go.
Yeah.
Sorry. Yeah.
Yeah, I think they did file an appeal, which makes it harder for us to, it just takes longer, to be quite honest.
Oh boy. Well, okay.
I would sometimes we have had PD go out and talk to the occupants about their behavior. So maybe that's something that I can work on. We've had other instances like this at the Central High School. They were harassing people. It pops up every once in a while where you get some unwanted behavior from people.
Sure. Well, if it's an easy solution, there are other cities that would have figured this out too. So thank you.
Yep.
Just to clarify, when we're talking about the 5th Street Bridge, are we talking about the old Green Jackson Street Bridge?
Yes. Yeah. The Green Bridge or the Jackson Street Bridge, the bridge of many names. Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'll work on having somebody maybe go down and talk to the people that are in that camp.
All right, Josh, your hand's up again.
One of the things that I talked with staff and some of the service providers about was this idea of a mobile trailer that had showers and restrooms and space for intake consultations. That to me seems like a really useful tool when we're talking about helping folks transition out of a campsite. And I know there was interest from at least some interest at a staff level, and there was certainly interest with the service providers. Is that something that we can move towards? And I thought there was maybe dollars in the CARES Act that might be a good fit for this. I'd like us to pursue solutions like that so that we provide a better level of service as we're looking to transition folks from a campsite.
Yeah, I know that's being discussed. I don't know where it is in the process, but I'll circle back and find out.
Well, I guess my concern was that it was stalled out in the process because there wasn't sufficient direction from council. And so I mean, my hope would be that we can provide that direction here, that there's enough of the council that would like to see us pursue a solution like that, that we can provide support for it.
Probably the best way to do that is for us to, as staff, look at the options and the money and then bring back options to council and get direction.
Well, is Chris Johansson on the call? Because I know Chris had looked into it.
Yeah, I'm on the call.
Maybe you could provide an update. I mean, my sense was that it was really a need for council direction to move forward with something like this.
Yeah, this is good direction for us. We have talked with Central Iowa Shelter and Services about it. We'd have to come back with a recommendation on the funding, but it would take council approval to move forward.
Okay, well, I'd like to see us move forward with something like this.
So council, this is Scott. One of the challenges that we'll want to understand is if we bring additional resources out into the encampments, are we enabling them further to stay unsheltered? And so there's a balance we're going to need to find of when we would engage those resources, because again, the ultimate goal is to get them into permanent housing. So there's definitely unintended consequences that we've got to be very well aware of in what resources are brought out into the encampments. Not to say that the answer should be no, but
I mean, if we're talking about moving folks, we should engage and do that as humanely as possible. And it seems like a very good time to bring out additional resources and to make an effort from the outreach side. So help them clean up, help them move efficiently, but hopefully help them get services so that we don't have to engage in that way again in the future.
is that to mean that those additional resources would show up about the same time as the notices and when the services are going out to find them a housing? That
seems like a good place to start, at least.
Okay. Well, Chris, let's both plan to talk with Melissa and others.
Yeah, Scott, I know there's other service providers other than the Central Iowa shelters that go out and really have a relationship. I mean, Joppa has a relationship and knows a lot of these folks by name and where they're at. I think that you need to give us some options of which provider is going to provide the best services for us to help some of these find and help them relocate or wherever they're going to relocate. But Connie brought up a great point. I mean, one of the reasons that they're not going into any shelter and they're scared because they're going to lose their stuff. In a some type of storage area where they can store their stuff when it's so bitterly cold or hot or the conditions just aren't very good where they're living. I think that we also need to look into that, and we need to have options for that and where that can be located at the shelter or whatever provider we're going to deal with. So I think that staff needs to come back and give us options, not just, hey, we're going to do this with the Central Iowa shelter.
Okay. And part of that discussion is, as you might imagine, with animals, particularly dogs. I know that's one of the concerns too. Is care.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right, let's move on to Connie.
Yeah, I just wanted to bring up last week, I think Frida's on the call. She brought up about the camp, and I think it's that 5th Street one. And I talked to Jonathan Gano about even getting them garbage bags, because that's one of the complaints we have is the garbage, is to have them help clean up. And I don't know if that got accomplished this weekend. But I think in talking with Melissa, if there was at the shelter, if there was space, and whether it be the shelter, there's other groups going out all the time and trying to help these people that are homeless. She brought up about that portable shower facility. And I think to me, it's a great way to gain trust, hopefully, and that they can get the services. So I think it serves two. It's more humane to have that opportunity for people to have the proper showers and bathroom facilities, but it's also a great way to connect with them. And I think whatever we can do, by getting all the providers together and discussing, because they do, Joe, you're right, they do know the people and they have a connection with them. So however we can get help, but then the end result is what housing can we get them? And I think that's one thing we need to research on, what kind of housing, whether it be, even if it's 3 months, 2 months, whatever, till they can get to even more permanent housing if they don't want to go into a shelter setting. So if there's some type of alternative that could work. So I guess I would like to see what could be done on that end of it.
All right, are there any other questions? All right, why don't we, this is a tough subject that we've been dealing with for, seems like a couple of decades, and if not before. So I think that let's keep working on it. And I appreciate Chris, you and Sue Ann, your input. And I think the council has continuing concerns and some good ideas. So let's keep working on it and maybe bring it back if need be, and see if there's some things we can do. Let's move on to our next subject, the rental codes.
So we're going to talk a little bit about the rental code now. So we need to do some amendments to the rental code, mainly to align with InterGov. In the code is heavy on process, let's just put it that way. And so we need to change some of the process in the code to align what we're doing with our new computer program. We did hold a public meeting on March 30th. We had about 43 attendees and 11 people spoke. And in addition, I've received a number of emails with comments. One of the things that, we're always looking for safety of occupants. And one of the things that has been an ongoing issue is knockout panels. So knockout panels were allowed years and years ago when large single-family homes were converted into multi-units. What it actually is a system of exiting where one unit has to exit to the emergency exit through another unit. So in order to allow the access to the unit to get to the exit, the door has what's referred to as a knockout panel. It is simply a piece of glass that is broken so that someone can reach in and unlock the door and gain access to the unit in order to exit the building. These are not safe. They're not supported by building code. A lot of times we are finding that tenants that are being required to have the exiting through their unit are not feeling safe and are blocking the access either by putting plywood or some other material over the knockout panel or blocking the door with furniture or somehow creating a lock that can't be reached through the knockout panel. So when we brought this to the public meeting, the comments were that it may result in a reduction of units, loss of income for a small business. They want to remain grandfathered in. They said that constructing an exterior exiting system creates another attractive nuisance and invites break-ins. The other issue we're dealing with is shared air heating sources. What that is again, in these large multi-family conversions, there's an old forced air heating system that actually heats all of the units. That creates shared air. It creates a fire hazard, and we would like to eliminate them. What we have done in the past is when the furnace finally fails and they come in to pull a permit for replacement, we make them replace and make them install individual units in each apartment unit. We're trying to consider stepping that up and having a sort of faster conversion. What we think is happening is these old units from the 60s and 70s are they're continually repairing them without permits or even with permits to try and keep them up and running without the conversion. When we brought it to the public meeting, they said, again, the change will adversely affect small business. They were asking the city for options and direction. They estimate upgrades could cost up to $20,000 per building. Why does this apply to rental units and not to doctors' offices? And they don't believe it's a health issue. This is the mechanical code that speaks to unsafe mechanical systems. And it's the basis of our sort of consideration of this as an option for more safe rental units moving forward. One thing we also talked about, we have what's called familial status or nuclear families. That's where a parent can have a house and allow their parents or children to reside in the house without a rental inspection. The group didn't feel like it was causing a maintenance issue. It could, I suppose, be picked up on exterior maintenance when we do the property improvement code. General comments, they asked us about grants, loans, tax abatement. If the units are lost, they asked if the taxes will go down. Concerns were expressed about potential loss of affordable housing units. We also introduced the training requirement, that is the training requirement for fair housing and the how to navigate the rental code and the crime-free multi-housing that we have previously discussed. They asked if it can be outsourced. Can they use the real estate licensing training instead? Can it be online as well as in person? Will there be additional cost? Will out-of-state owners be required to take the training? They also, yeah, the additional cost, they want to know if that's going to be built into the license or if they're going to have to pay extra for the training. And then again, thinking about the intergov, we explained the benefits and they think that it would be helpful in managing inspections. A little confusion about the process of license versus certificate. And I know we're going to have to do outreach and training before this goes live. Actually, the way the system is shaking out to work is that it won't be any difference between license and certificate. It's just a change in terminology more than change in process. So I don't think it's going to be that difficult if we just continue to work with the idea that it's a license that's issued that expires just like a certificate, and you get a new license when it passes inspection. Talked about the fee schedule, explained the history. They're opposed to a fee increase. They feel the timing is insensitive due to COVID. So next steps, looking for direction from council. The question is, do we amend the code to require forced area units for each apartment unit by the second license renewal inspection after June 1st of 2021 and no later than June 1st of 2025? Again, these are just dates that we put out there to allow time for conversions on rental cycles. Or would you rather allow the conversion when the units need to be replaced or repaired? Amend the code to require elimination of knockout panels by, again, the second license renewal or June 1st of 2025, or allow them to remain until the door is replaced. Of the two, I think the knockout panels are probably the biggest safety risk for people living in these units, not being able to get out in case of a fire. Anyway, elimination of the nuclear family or allow it to remain in the code. Again, amend the code to require landlord training to be rolled out in the fall of 2021 to be completed. They'd have to complete it on the first inspection after January 1st of 2022. Our goal is to have a hybrid at this point to allow them to take it online or an in-person half day with groups of people as we get further away from COVID concerns.
Joanne,
Sure.
Joe's got his hand up. You want to take a question as you move along?
No, that's fine. Love to take a question.
Joe, go ahead.
Thanks, Mayor. So Sue Ann, going forward, you say increasing fees of 5%. Would we be doing this if, would it always be increasing 5% if we weren't doing some of these things? And what is the increase? Whatever my concern is, and I understand the safety issues, whatever fee that we increase or whatever, that's going directly to the person that's paying the bills. And it's not the guy that owns it. He's passing that on. And so we've got to be very cautious about affordable housing and raising rents by doing some of these things. And I understand if it's a health and safety issues, the knockout panel seems like a logical thing that needs to be taken care of. But if we're doing an online testing, is that the reason for the increase?
No, it isn't real. We haven't increased rental inspection fees for 5, 6, 7 years. I can't remember how long it's been. The rental inspection fees don't come anywhere close to covering the cost of the service that we provide in the rental inspections. And I totally get the balance between increasing fees and affordable housing. It's a tricky balance. the other side of the question is how much do we want taxpayers in the city to subsidize the rentals for the owners, totally understanding that there's a pass through. So I think the 5% was just to capture some of the sort of over the years that we haven't increased to cover the cost of the service. But going along with that is conduct a fee study and try and figure out what the balance is and how much subsidy does the city want to put into the rental program, and how it reflects on affordable housing. Council could certainly say, don't increase fees until after we do the fee study. That's another way to deal with it. We have not anticipated that the training would cost the landlords anything at this point.
Okay.
Now, fee study might lead to that. But those are two sort of separate things. I can see how it sort of blends together and makes people think that we're having them pay for the training.
Right. So can you go back to the slide before this and talk to me about the unit, the air units for each apartment, and how in the past that's been allowed, but now we're asking that it not be allowed. And can you just tell me the reason and why we've allowed it in the past, why you're recommending that it doesn't?
Well, what I'm told by the building department is that we've adopted the mechanical code 15 years ago or so, and they've never allowed shared air in the mechanical code. I'm sure that some of these forced air units were, for lack of a better term, grandfathered in because the conversion is so old. So what we've been doing to date is when the unit fails and they have to replace it, then they have to separate out the shared air. We've been sort of told by the building department that we need to be a little bit more aggressive about getting them separated out because of the health hazards and the fire hazard. Now, council can certainly decide that they want them to remain until they fail and then do the separation, or have this phased in approach.
So
Bill?
does that?
I'm sorry. You have something else, Joe? Bill's got his hand up.
Yeah, just real quick, Mayor. So how does that work with, and I think one of the questions was on there, how does that work with different office buildings when they have one big unit forcing air to these different office buildings? How is the difference? I guess I would just, I don't understand how that's different, I guess, myself either.
Yeah, I think the difference is that when you go to a doctor's office, you're in there for, hour, whatever, and then you're out and you go home. When you're at home, you're there for longer periods of time. That's where you go home to be sick. But I think one of the bigger issues is the fire safety. When you have air transferring between units and something starts on fire, you're pulling smoke and fire into other units through that shared system. And I'm not a mechanical code expert, so I can certainly go to the experts and find out what the difference is in the code between offices and habitable structures and see if there's a rationale in the mechanical code.
All right. Thanks, Suann.
Bill?
Thank you, Mayor. Swan, I'm just curious, with the fee structures, have we benchmarked those against any other cities around us or even in the state?
We're working on that with finance. We don't have the answer to that. I don't have the answer to that today. I think what we were thinking is more what our cost of service is to the landlords and how it affects our taxpayers. But I'm sure that when we come back with ideas on the fee study, we'll also be able to give you a better idea of what other communities in the area are doing as far as charging.
Yeah, because I'm kind of worried that if taxpayers are making up the shortfall in the fees, are they doing it elsewhere as well? Just my thought.
Mayor, if I could real quick, this is Scott. As far as context with the cost, there is a savings that all landlords right now with rental properties are receiving through the reduction in the rollback. And it's pretty significant. They're going from what was originally 100% in taxes to close to 50%. And so those figures, when you do the math, is about $1,200 of savings annually for every $100,000 property. And so a lot of these properties are seeing savings of 2 or 3 times that amount when, they might have 4 or 5 or even 6 units within a shared system. So there's pretty significant savings on the property tax side that all of these rental properties are receiving through the tax changes. So just be aware of that as well.
Linda?
I don't understand what Scott is saying. Many of these landlords just have homes in residential neighborhoods with maybe 1 or 2 dwellings. And most of them, I think, are single family that we're referring to. So what kind of a tax are you talking about for multifamily?
Yeah, so it kicks in the number of units. So you're right. If it was just a single unit being shared within a single, a 2-unit single family home, that's a different scenario.
That's completely different. And I think most of the callers that were on the line on that March 30th, and I think most of the landlords are just concerned they have rentals in the city of Des Moines, homes that they're renting out as single family homes. So I just want everybody to be aware they're not receiving any kind of a tax benefit that you would have like you would have with a multifamily.
But
And
if they're renting their homes to just one family, then it's not an issue with the knockout panels or
with the knockout panels.
Even the air conditioning as well, right? It's when you get into those 3, 4, 5, even more units that the issue, and that's when you're typically dealing with a multifamily home classification.
I think we have quite a few homes. I don't know, maybe Sue Ann could tell us that are, older homes that have been converted and they have like 2 units or 3 units. Do those qualify for tax benefits, are you saying? If I have a house over in Drake University.
Well, yes, they do. It's a question of whether they already had. So I can provide some additional examples of that, Councilwoman.
Okay.
Yep.
And then I'd like to know, when you talk about you want the fair housing training, is this coming to us from the Human and Civil Rights? Because they've got this in their agenda that they want to put in place, but how many complaints have there been? Are we aware of any complaints that have been filed with somebody saying that fair housing was violated? Because I know many people have companies that manage their properties and they're all trained in fair housing. So I'm just curious as to how many complaints there have been. Can somebody find that out?
Yeah, I can find that out. I know there have been complaints, but I can talk to Joshua.
Okay.
And get you a better concrete number.
Great. I would appreciate that. Thank you.
All right, Lindy, okay.
So I think I'm still looking if I can get some idea of what council's thinking on the air units and knockout panels, we can start working on the code.
Joe?
Mayor, just, and I can, the nuclear family, I think that we should allow that to still take place how it is. I think if a parent buys a home for their kid and they want them to live there, and I think that we should leave that alone. As far as the knockout panels, I would agree that's probably a health and safety issue. The forced air, I mean, I probably need a little bit more information. Sue Ann, sorry, that's probably not the answer you're looking for. But I'm not quite sure how that works. I really don't want people to keep fixing old units, and not have them energy efficient for the tenants that have to pay the bill. And so if that's happening, then yeah, we need to figure out how to make that better for the tenants.
We can certainly do some more work on the mechanical exchange and get you some more information on that.
But I hate to see that we have to wait until it's replaced and then they just keep fixing it, an old unit. I mean, sometimes you can't even get Freon for some of these older units. And if they keep doing that, eventually they're going to have to be replaced, or they're just not going to work very good or efficient. And so at that point in time, the tenants paying, more, that their monthly bills are more than what they need to be spending. And so you go back to the affordable housing argument, where we're not doing them justice by, this is supposed to be affordable housing unit, but we put so much stipulation on there that it's not. So it's a tricky road. It really is.
Connie?
If you want some direction, I would say on the knockout panels, definitely we need to make safety a priority. After seeing some of the old homes that have been converted, I think we can do what we can. As far as to what Joe brought up about more information on the forced air units, I think we need to do whatever we can to, again, for the health and safety, but also if they're, possibly if they're going to be putting newer ones in, again, that's a savings for the tenants that I think we need to look at and getting more energy efficient, because a lot of times until you're forced to do something, these, depending how old they are, if they're a certain age, I think we should just say it's time to separate them, especially if it's for the health and safety. But I'd like more information from, the mechanical people who can give us their rationale on why, so we understand it better.
Joe, your hand's still up?
No, Mayor.
All right, Josh?
Yeah, I'll just weigh in. I do think the knockout panel, it's a very clear health and safety issue and a habitability issue. So I'm comfortable going forward with that change. I also, I think we should probably be going forward on the forced air separation, and I'd like to look at opportunities from an efficiency perspective there as well. I think that's a major piece of this, and if it's an opportunity to lower utilities for tenants and lower their energy burden as well, and I think that's worth looking into. I would be comfortable maintaining the nuclear family exception and addressing those issues. If there are concerns, addressing that with different policies in the future. Do we have data in terms of how many homes are using that nuclear family exception?
I think that's something we can pull out pretty easily out of the database.
Okay, I mean, it would just maybe be helpful to understand how much of an issue that is in the broader sense. I'd also love to understand how many homes have knockout panels and how many places this forced air piece is an issue as well.
We are not going to be able to get that out of our computer database.
Okay, we just don't have the data on either of those.
No, we don't. Unfortunately.
Is that something that we're going to be collecting going forward? I mean, because I assume that's something that when we do a rental inspection, our inspectors notice both the knockout panel and the and how the mechanicals are structured, right?
They do. They don't list it specifically unless it's a violation. So we would have to figure out a way to incorporate that into InterGov as a collectible field. Let me work with IT on that. See if they have suggestions.
I mean, it seems if we've identified these as issues that it's worthwhile going forward to be collecting data on them.
Right. Yeah. Especially if we're going to phase them out, we'd have to know where they are.
Yeah.
All right, Connie?
I was going to say, I think that would be helpful information. If we can enter in when they go in to inspect, if they, I assume, do they ask for the inspection of furnaces and things like that?
If we believe that a furnace is is not safe, we will ask for them to hire a mechanical professional to look at the furnace and tell us that it's in good repair. That's another option for us, would be to get with professionals and say if a furnace is over 20 years old, or whatever the number is, that it needs to be replaced due to its age and its energy efficiency. And that would be another way to phase them out based on some criteria that we develop for the age of the unit.
Yeah, I think we can look at that, but I'm just saying, from even going forward for inspectors, if for rental inspection, do they have to provide, I guess, do they have to provide the fact that they have had their furnaces, do they have inspection every year? Do we require that?
We do not. We could require that by code if you wish to put it in.
Okay, I just think it's a normal course of doing business to keep things operating efficiently and also safely.
Josh, your hand still up?
No, apologies.
Do we have any direction on a fee increase at this point, or would you like to wait for a fee study? What is the feeling on that?
I'll chime in. I just think I would like to see, what are we charging now? What is the rate and how do we compare?
Joe?
Yeah, I would agree with Connie, but I think that's conducted a fee study before we, do. I mean, we might see that we're losing 40% and we're only increasing it, 5%. So I'm not suggesting that we're going to increase it that much, but I would like to see what our costs are compared to what we're charging as it's passed on to the tenant and the landlords.
Carl? Carl, can you unmute yourself?
Yes. Sue Ann, could you remind us when the fees were last increased, please?
I think it was 2007 by 3%.
2007. Okay, thanks.
That's to my point, Carl, that, I mean, we could be losing a lot more than 5%. And I think that needs to be reiterated to everyone when we're only going to increase it by 5%.
That's a good point, Joe.
Oh, it's drastically lower. 5% won't even touch what you're subsidizing.
Well, then we need to take a look at it and maybe, you know, we just need to take a look at it and then we can make our decision based upon that.
Okay, so what I'm going to do is not do the 5% and start the work with finance on a presentation on where they think we're at and where we're at in line with other communities and get guidance on a fee study at that point.
Would that work for everybody?
Yeah, I believe so. I mean, we still could make a recommendation by January 1st of 2022 to increase it whatever we want. If we're going to increase it at all, you're going to come back to us with this fee study by, I would assume by the fall, wouldn't you?
That would be the goal.
Okay.
So we do have time. We can work on that more.
All right. Hopefully that gives you some direction, Sue Ann. Linda,
does,
another
thank you.
comment?
I just had one comment. Where are we going to discuss any further if a person rents a home to a family member? Have we put that in place now that they have to get a full rental inspection? And it'll be treated like any other rental?
What I've heard, council member, is that we will not require a nuclear family to be inspected as a rental.
But nuclear family, is there a difference between those that are just living with another family? If I have a two-story, if I have a rental, if I have a duplex and my kids are living next door, but that's different than somebody who says, I don't have to have a rental inspection because my son lives here or my daughter lives here. I thought we were in agreement that we wanted those type of rentals to have a full rental inspection. How, I guess we can hear from the rest of the council, but I think we have quite a few homes that are being rented supposedly by family, but we have lots of issues and there doesn't seem to be anything we can do about those.
There are a certain number of those nuclear family where a son or daughter lives in the house and creates other problems for the neighborhood. Just being not good neighbors. The rental certificate wouldn't necessarily address the behavior.
Well, it would certainly address, we'd certainly have more governance over a rental property than we do a single family property.
Yes, we do.
And I thought that was the whole point of this when we started this, was to have rental. And when you talk about nuclear family, we're saying it's a single family home and one of the kids or a relative is renting this house and they don't have to have a rental certificate. So I'm surprised to hear that you're not doing anything with that.
Well, we did discuss that previously, and I heard from a couple council members that they did not want to have inspections of nuclear families. So I think it's up to council to decide which way they want to go.
Can we have a little more discussion on that? I guess I'd be curious as to why we wouldn't want a rental to be under the rental guidelines.
All right, Joe?
I'm just surprised by that.
Yeah. Thanks, Mayor. So Sue Ann, and I appreciate Linda's question, and she's got a very valid point. How many, you've been doing this a long time. I mean, how many instances do we have where we've got someone renting to their nuclear family and it's causing problems that would be under the rental code that we can really address in a better way? I guess I'd like to know, how many are we looking at that this is going to help? And remember, we are going to have a property maintenance code, hopefully by the end of the year, that's going to go to all single family homes and all properties in the city of Des Moines, correct? We're still, that's still our goal, right, Scott?
Yes, and actually Sue Ann can speak to the timing of that better than I even.
So, I mean, so we will have a little bit of pushback with our property maintenance code. But going to my first question, I'll let you answer that. I mean, how many are we looking at that Linda's talking about? It sounds like she's had some experience with that.
I don't know the exact number. I do know that the area King or one of those streets that has a lot of problems because of the number of rental units. When we went kind of through the street face, we found that a fair number of them were also nuclear family that were causing problems in that particular neighborhood.
Southeast King?
Yep.
Okay. I know exactly what you're talking about.
Yep.
And I know that, I have residents call me, and when I send it over to zoning, I'm told, well, it's, we're told that it's a sister or a son that lives there. But the neighbors say, wait a minute, that's not really a relative. I mean, what are we doing to me, it's just a way to get out of having a rental inspection.
That there is no particular oversight at this point of who they claim to live there. So they fill out a form and they say, my son lives there with his 3 kids. And we don't have any verification or way to verify who's actually in there, which then does possibly create a loophole in that system. I don't know to the extent, I mean, some of them are very well maintained. They buy them as an investment property and let their daughter live or son live there, and they're maintaining it just as any other owner occupant would. But there are some who don't, and I don't know the percentages. I can certainly come up with the number of nuclear families in the city. I can probably get a scatter map so that you can see where they're located. We could probably run junk and debris complaints against those particular addresses and see if they are causing that type of problem in the neighborhood.
But why not just save ourselves some time and money and just say, you got to have a rental certificate?
That would certainly be easier for staff, but it's up to council.
And it's better for the neighborhoods. I mean, again, my concern is what do our neighborhoods look like? And we have, it seems to me that we have quite a few homes that are not being taken care of, that are rentals, which, I mean, even when I give you information about a rental, it takes 2 weeks, and it seems like the wheels move slowly. And I just to mention the one over that I've been working with you on, Sue Ann, that's a rental, but the guy's running a car repair business from it. And there doesn't, I mean, you go out and he says, no, I'm just fixing my friend's cars. I mean, at some point, that's not fair to our neighborhoods to be able to not control what happens with non-owner occupied homes, whether it's a family member or not. And I know I segued a little bit, but this is a cause of frustration for people that live in our neighborhoods.
And that's absolutely true. And we have issued a notice. We did get him to admit that he was doing auto repair for his uncle. Again, we're kind of getting off topic.
Yeah,
but,
that's off topic.
yeah.
But I mean, have we asked count? Because nobody ever asked me about whether we wanted to have rental certificates for nuclear families. So I don't know how that decision was made. Maybe there aren't 4 votes. I don't know. But no, I mean, this comes as a surprise to me to learn that we're not going to make family members have a rental certificate.
Well,
Honey?
maybe, go ahead.
Connie, you have your hand up?
Yeah, I was just going to say, I think that was one thing I didn't answer to when you were asking us about. I would say that I think everybody, whether it's family or not, to streamline it. If you are renting your a house, apartment, or whatever, whether it's family or not, you should have a rental certificate. It would just streamline it. Because to Linda's point, it could be a cousin. Who knows? You guys don't have time to verify. I just think it would be easier, and eventually that family member might move out and you want to rent it to somebody else, you're going to need it. It just streamline the process. If you're renting it and getting money from that, then you should have a rental inspection.
Just to be clear, the definition that we go by for requiring a rental certificate does not necessarily require the transfer of funds. It's let, lease, or otherwise allow the occupancy of.
Yeah, so it, like you said, it's confusing. It's hard to monitor. So it might be easier just to, when it meets that description, just get a rental inspection or certificate.
All right, Linda, did you have something else?
No, I just hadn't raised my hand, but I hope we can
No,
have
that's
more
good.
discussion and council will get to have some input as to how that's decided, because if it's not owner occupied, I would like to see us have a rental certificate.
Joe, hand still up?
Yeah, no, Your Honor, I can lower it, but I mean, I'd just like to see some of the data that Sue-Ann would gather for us about, I understand where Linda and Connie's coming from, and I'm not going to make that decision right now, because some of the properties that I've dealt with are on the other side of the spectrum where, they've bought it for their daughter to live in, and they fixed it up and put a bunch of money into it. And, they just, there's many more things you have to do if it's just a home to become a rental, and it costs thousands of dollars. And so we'll just have to take a look at it, I guess. I'm not saying yes or no right now on that.
Okay, Sue-Ann?
Okay, if there's no further questions on this, we could move on to noise control.
Oh, I just have one other thing is if we're going to have more conversation on the nuclear family piece, I'd appreciate hearing from Monisha as our equity coordinator on potential impacts of a change there as well.
Certainly, we can do that.
All right, we're going to move on to the noise ordinance.
Yeah. Okay, noise control. So the reason for the change, when we did the zoning code change in 2019, it retired all then existing zoning districts. And the zoning districts at that time were used to determine where sound permits could be issued. For instance, type A and G in downtown zoning districts. Since we no longer have those zoning districts, we need to establish sound permit zones for the issuance of permits. So instead of using the zoning districts, the idea is to use sort of mapping areas so that we can decide where noise control permits are going to be issued. Zone 1 would be the Wells Fargo arena area. I would allow concerts in and around, like in the parking lots and a street closure, like they're going to do for the skating event. Second one would be Western downtown. That includes Gateway West and the streets around that, and then the Court Avenue district to allow, again, the patio bands and music in the streets. Principal Park is another area that we would see issuing those permits. So in those areas, west of the Des Moines River, they would be able to get a type A permit, the 8 a month at 85 dBCs at the point of measurement, to 11 p.m. on weeknights, to 12:30 on weekends and holidays. They could also get a type G with a street closure, and that's the 112 dBc, 50 feet from sound equipment. Again, the end time is 11 p.m. on weeknights, 12:30 on weekends and holidays. And then again, the type E background sound on the patio. When we move over to East Village has different noise control concerns. And so we will treat this we're suggesting that we treat this a little bit differently. So Zone 4 is a noise control area. It goes from Des Moines Street over and then down to Court. In the noise control area would be a limit on the limited type E permit on the patio. An A permit if the patio is not within 250 feet of a residential occupancy. A G permit, which is the street closure permit, but all permits and amplified sound in the noise control area would end at 10 p.m. Then there's a broader East Village map, would be called Zone 5. It goes further out and would allow type E permits, again, on the patio. And an A permit would be allowed for 8 events a month, measured at the edge of the patio. And this would be on the outside of the noise control. So this would be Peachtree, AJ's, some of those patios that are not next to or adjacent to residential. Again, the type G permit would allow live music with street closures. And again, in this area, the sound permits would end at 10 p.m. I see Council Member Gatto has his hand up.
Yeah, Sue Ann, with the new market district coming and the Mid-America Park that we're looking at, maybe moving some of the street closures and things that's in the Western Gateway when this is finished, maybe that would be moved down there and be able to have live music. Will we include that now with how the Western Gateway is going to be set up, that particular park?
No, I did not want to do an overlay or a zone in the market district until we knew sort of what kind of music was wanted over there. And so I anticipate that when they get closer to deciding what events they want to have, that we'll probably have a zone specific to them that may be different than the East Village.
Okay, thank you.
Bill?
Thank you, Mayor. I know we had this discussion in the past about permits per month. We didn't make any, or did we make any accommodation for months that have 5 weekends? Next month, May, for example, we have 5 weekends. Can we make an adjustment to have 10 permits for the months that have 5 weekends? Seems a little unfair to me.
We have not included that, but we certainly can.
I think it's the only fair thing to do. I mean, how would you pick a weekend not to have it just so we comply with the ordinance? Let's take a look at that.
Okay, we can certainly take a look at that. Okay, we did treat the Botanical Center in a similar fashion to Brenton skating and some other events. I did reach out to them and talk to them about it, and they have no problem with being treated the same as some other event centers. Then there's the citywide street closure events. I started thinking about Beaverdale Fest and Ingersoll and some other street closures that are prohibited under the current language of the code. And we could amend it to allow street closures citywide, having the same band ability as sort of the downtown. So if Drake, for instance, wanted to do an event and close the street, they could have a band on the street. Southwest 9th occasionally has street closures with events. This would allow them to have a band. So I just thought that we needed to be able to allow street closure events citywide. So again, questions and direction.
Anybody have any thoughts? Carl?
Well, thank you, Mayor County. Sue Ann, could you go back to one of the East Village maps? I'm just thinking about the Brenton Skating Plaza. Let's see, so that's on Grand and
Well,
Fifth.
Brenton has its own permit.
Oh, it does. Okay,
Yep.
Thank you for clarifying.
Right,
you.
so so we're taking that permit and using that as an example for the Botanical Center. And it's also an example that we're going to use for Simon Estes.
Gotcha. Okay, thank you for clarifying.
Bill?
Thanks again, Mayor. This one's a little bit off the subject, but speaking of noise in the neighborhood, I know we kind of abandoned looking at like roosters and chickens in backyards. I've got one on your desk right now over on Payne Avenue of roosters at all hours and probably all hours of the day going off. Are we going to look at that again?
We did start looking at that several years ago. It's probably been 5 now. And I don't know why it dropped off our radar, or if council just, I really don't know. I was in a couple meetings on it. There were strong feelings from the community that owns and raises chickens about the rooster prohibition. We can certainly circle back on that and kind of explain where we are and what the next steps would be.
I'd appreciate that.
Linda?
Thank you. I would support Bill in that effort to ban roosters. And I clearly remember when it was brought forward, and we had a couple of urban farmers that showed up and said, no, we want our roosters. And, you know, they pretty much filled the council chamber. And again, it was, you know, the voices of the minority. because I can tell you that the residents that live in Ward 2 that I hear from are real tired of hearing roosters day and night. And you don't need a rooster to get eggs. So if you want to have a chicken, that's fine. You can do chickens, get their eggs, but a rooster serves no purpose. And I would like to see us move forward. I've had several people ask me, whatever happened to that?
Yeah, we'll look into it and bring it back for further discussion.
Thank you.
Thanks, Sue Ann.
All right, Joanne, move on.
I think if everybody's okay with the way this has been presented, we'll go ahead with the ordinance amendment on the noise control.
All right, good.
And
Linda,
that
is
would
your hand still
include
up?
the, would that still include the 10 permits for months that have 5 weekends in it?
Yeah, we can certainly work that in.
Great.
All right, Sue Scott, any closing thoughts?
None for me. We really appreciate the input from council. This gives us direction on all three topics.
Yeah, I do want to thank Mayor and Council for your direction.
All right, thank you for the presentation and bringing us up to date. We've got a busy schedule today, and Jeff, you're on. Are we going to have a closed session today?
Yes, Your Honor. We will have a closed session beginning at 3:45 this afternoon.
All right. Well, thank you all for attending, and council members will get back together, reconvene at 3:45. Until then, this meeting